This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi, show number 376. We are your spoiler-free place for Star Wars discussion, analysis, and rhetoric. I am your host, Dan Z, drinking One Nation coffee out of my Boba's Beans coffee mug for the second week in a row because Boba Fett is very much on my mind because of the spectacular resurgence of him in The Mandalorian Season 2. Speaking of that, we're going to talk about Chapter 15 of The Mandalorian, The Believer, featuring Din from F105 and Jay Krebs from Podcast Stardust. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee are two returning guests to Coffee with Kenobi to talk about Chapter 15 of The Mandalorian, The Believer. First, we're going to bring in from F105, you know him, Din. Din, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Dan. Hey, Jay. It's really great to be here. I love this episode. I can't wait to talk about it.
I'm excited to talk about it with you, and I didn't realize until we were pre-gaming that you have the same name as The Mandalorian. It didn't even hit me. You're made to be on the show.
Well, it is strange because my last name is Jalonen, so Din Djarin, Din Jalonen.
Oh my goodness.
It's a little odd.
I love it. This is the way. But we've also got someone you know as This Is the Jay.
Yes.
Jay Krebs is here from Podcast Stardust. Jay, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Dan. Hey, Din. This is so exciting. This is an amazing episode, and I am super excited to talk about it. So thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. I like that we're Dan Din or Din Dan. We kind of sound like we're a bounty hunter in our own regard. I like that. Yes, there's a lot of stuff with names and a lot of stuff with identity, which is perfect to talk about The Believer. We start the episode in some sort of a junkyard. There's TIE fighters all over the place. There's some salvage work going on. And Jay, at the beginning of this, we get to experience Mayfeld again. What was your initial impression of Mayfeld before this episode?
Well, I was never really introduced to him as a comedian before. So I know a lot of people, when they had seen him in the last episode, were kind of colored, I guess you could say, in their perceptions because they knew him as the comedian that he is. And I didn't. So I was fresh on this perspective, and I thought that he was a fun villain. I loved the way that he was portrayed in the first one, kind of sleazy, but yet, he was kind of the villain that you love to hate kind of thing. And I thought that he got his comeuppance as he should have. And but things kind of turned around for me in this episode.
And Din, what about you? See, I knew he was a comedian, but I'd never heard him tell a joke. I'd never seen him in anything until The Prisoner from season 1. So I had no preconceived notion, just like Jay, at all. But what did you think about him just as a character, not as an actor?
Yeah, I also had no preconceived notions because I didn't know of his comedy or who he was. But I felt he was really kind of electric. He sort of just lit up the screen whenever he was on. And in what I thought was my least favorite Mandalorian episode with the breakout, whatever that one was called.
The Prisoner.
So yeah, The Prisoner, right. So it wasn't my favorite episode, but he was electric. He really has a vitality and a believability to his performance, even though Sam Witwer, who plays Darth Maul,
sure,
and Starkiller, he talks about how there's a certain style of Star Wars acting which is kind of over the top but still works. And I felt that Bill is kind of like that in his own way, though, a totally unique way that we haven't seen before in Star Wars. And I also really like that, okay, he's a villain and he's sleazy, but his sense of humor really comes off the screen. And I find that refreshing.
Fair. Well, you both had a much more favorable opinion of the character than I did. I thought he was despicable and irredeemable and one of the more uglier characters in Star Wars as far as what would seem to be inside him right? What made him tick? It didn't seem like much made him tick. He just seemed like a mean person. I thought he was very dismissive of the child and Din Djarin. And when I heard and realized that he was coming back to the show, I actually let out an audible groan. I thought, oh, what do we need this guy for? Boy, am I glad that I was wrong. And I could not have been more wrong, which is the power of storytelling. But we're obviously going to get to that. So they are there to get him. We knew from the previous episode the tragedy that Mayfeld was going to make an appearance. And we found out that we need him because he was once an Imperial. He knows the Imperial clearances and protocols. And so they take him. They bring him on to Slave One. But before they bring him on to Slave One, do either of you want to say anything about that initial conversation and the quote-unquote recruitment, if you could even call it a recruitment? He didn't really have much of a choice. But didn't anything about that jump out for you before once he gets on to Slave One?
I think I sort of answered your first question about the actor, not really the character.
Oh, that's okay.
I think that there's something going on with this show that also was in the Clone Wars, which can only come from, I think, a really a fundamental understanding of the themes that are important to Lucas, which would be that no matter how dark a situation or a person is, light can still be found if people are willing to make the choice and to make the effort. And so when I saw him again, I just had this feeling that something different is going to go on with him in this episode because of the way the season has been going. I was worried with season 1 that every episode was going to be a little too heavy on what made the OT work, and maybe not a lot of the nuance and deeper stuff that George was exploring and teaching his one Padawan through the Clone Wars and also in the prequels. So I was happy to see him and excited to see where it would go, because this whole season had been showing me that what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is that the show was not becoming what I was worried it was going to sort of become too like by the book, but every episode is pretty much advanced the character or something in an unexpected way. So I knew we were going to get something unexpected. It's
conventionally unconventional storytelling, and I think it's kind of created its own little subsect, its own little genre within the Star Wars universe. And I've done this twice now this season, but I usually start out the show with people giving me a brief synopsis of what they think of the overall episode and then a letter grade. So Jay, just overall thoughts on the episode and then a letter grade.
Overall thoughts on the episode I thought was amazing. Even though we don't get Grogu, we don't get the child at all in this episode, there's some amazing, not only world building, but also character building. And kind of going back to what you just asked into, I was sitting here thinking about what really stood out to me. And I think The Mandalorian in general has really evoked a sense of real world type of characters, but yet still within the Star Wars universe, which I think is an extremely amazing balance that they've struck, because originally Star Wars was all about the space opera. And now we're getting more gritty. I mean, just the fact that we started out on this junkyard. I mean, it's the real world behind the scenes kind of Star Wars sorts of things. So I think that this is amazing in that respect. I loved the entire aspect of bringing in some of these threads from even things like Operation Cinder, which we'll be talking about, I'm sure. And just the whole idea that someone that you thought, as we just said with Mayfeld, this was a very Mayfeld-centric episode, I feel like, and it's building to something else, but that they can actually change and they can see things beyond, where their situation had put them previously. And for Kara, it was kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, because you knew she despised him and wanted nothing to do with him because he was Imperial. But yet her sunny disposition was the reason why she was able to, bring Mayfeld back. And I'm so impressed. And, Din the Mandalorian himself, in the way that he was able to use his values as a father figure. There's so much in this I'm skipping around and I'm going way too far ahead, but this one really definitely gets an A+ for me. And I'm surprised that I love it so much, but I do.
Right. Well, I would give it a nice solid A. You know, these seem to be building and building and getting better and better. Is it better than a tragedy? I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if it really matters that it's better than a tragedy. The tragedy hit me more impactfully because it's supposed to, because of how it ends and in the angst that it fulfills within us. We all sort of have that secret desire for a little pain in our poetry, because it makes for good drama. It makes for good creativity, and it makes for a longing for what's going to happen next. And what we got here was certainly not a step backwards, but it was much more character-driven than the last episode. It's arguable that this may be one of the more important character pieces of this entire series so far. So definitely an A for me for some really fun, unexpected reasons. Dan, what about you? Quick synopsis and letter grade.
Yeah, quick one. I'm just really shocked that I saw online that some people would call something like this filler.
Oh, boy.
So what I was, to add on what I was saying before, to the fact that I think it's imbued with a sense of the themes and the soul. Soul is a word that I would use. That's important to George Lucas, you know? And I know that Dave Filoni, he's mentioned quite a few times that he finds that he wants to infuse all the work he's doing now with as much of what was important to George in it as he can. So I know that George was saying that his sequel trilogy way back was going to be more gray, and this is the penultimate.
Yep, penultimate.
Penultimate episode about, I think, the grayness of the universe that George was wanting to explore, like, which was basically, you know, if a rebellion wins, then there's a mess, and what bad things did they do to achieve it, and what bad has it created in the galaxy, and what, you know, the good comes, but what's the cost that the good came with? And I think this episode, we'll talk about it more, but it really gets into the nuances of that a lot. And I think on a macro, like, galactic level, as the show's been doing, but in this episode on a really personal level, which made me feel really strong emotions. And whenever Star Wars or any art makes me feel something really strongly, I know something good is going on.
Right, here. So what letter grade would you give it?
I have a hard time not giving this a perfect score.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That is totally acceptable, I would think.
I can't find a thing to critique about it.
Fair enough. All right, so the only thing I really want to point out to the beginning is seeing the inside of Slave One and how the cockpit rotates, sort of the gyroscopic effect of that was absolutely stunning and breathtaking. Seeing that Boba Fett had his armor fresh and painted, I thought was awesome. It was kind of cool to see him, because when they first scanned up and showed the Slave One on the little horizon there, I had sort of forgotten that Boba Fett was around, and it sort of took my breath away quickly. I'm like, oh, sweet, he's still here. He's still around. And while he didn't have much of a big role, he certainly knew how to put an exclamation point on the end of the episode. But we'll get to that. So we go to the planet Morak. That's where we know that there is an Imperial terminal that they can hack into. It's an Imperial mining hub. It has a Rhydonium, I guess, a factory, for lack of a better word. So they get there. There's this wonderful action sequence that is very reminiscent of Indiana Jones and the truck sequence. But the Mandalorian has to make a choice. He makes two big choices in this episode. The first is he has to put on Imperial tank armor, and then he has this great conversation with Mayfeld before the pirates show up. Mayfeld kind of dumps his bucket, so to speak, and he explains a lot of he starts at least to explain what makes him tick. But talk about that conversation between the two of them and the fact that the Mandalorian has a change of clothes in this portion of the show.
Oh, you mean the conversation they're having in the transport?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Which I love, because
Me too.
Bill, it's like, okay, Mayfeld. Okay, so there's a guy I'd like to. He just seems so fun to hang out with. I like his sense of playfulness with Din. He's being playful and he's being the comedian that he is, but he's doing it for us. He's doing it for serious reasons, to try to question the things that we believe in, and what do we really believe in, and how high up are those things on our sort of hierarchy of needs? And that's been going on in the whole season this season with Din having to reevaluate his creed based on circumstance. And I think that's what Bill is really usually when we do these episodes or a movie, I'm into the mythology and the spiritual stuff, and I'm so well researched and I know exactly what I want to say, but this episode I don't, because it really makes me think a lot.
Well,
and then so that conversation that they're having really makes it, he's really forcing Din to think about what the helmet means to him, and do you know what I'm getting at?
I do.
I
do, because he's flat out says, either you're not supposed to take off your armor or you're not supposed to show your face. What is it? To me, what he's really asking. See, I didn't get much of a sense of playfulness. I got very much a sense of angst, because I think that the Mandalorian is a threat to him, to Mayfeld, because not only is he physically imposing and dangerous, he's already shown he can easily outmaneuver Mayfeld, but I think it's more that the Mandalorian is so comfortable in his skin and so set in his ways that his identity is firmly ensconced into his psyche. But Mayfeld, I get a sense, is very lost. He very much doesn't have a direction. That's why, to me, this is called the believer, because he ends up believing in himself, which I don't know that he had for a very long time. So I think the Mandalorian is a bit of a threat to him. Yes, he's antagonizing him, and it's under the guise of playfulness, but I think there's nothing playful about it. I really think he wants to know, why is this guy so subtle? I mean, literally, in that cab, Jay, when they're driving, he's staring straight ahead. He doesn't need to do chit-chat. He's got a mission. He wants to help save the child, and that's all he cares about. But then Mayfeld throws out these things, these really thought-provoking things like, invaders on their land is all we are, whether we're in the New Republic or the Empire, and then he says,
that's one of those gray things I was talking about.
Absolutely. And then he says, you can make it through the day and still sleep at night. You're doing better than most. And often when people are saying things like that, they're really talking about themselves. So Jay, what was your take on that conversation?
Well, I'm sitting here thinking about everything that Din just said as well. And, you mentioned a couple of words that really stood out to me. Soul is one of them. And the hierarchy of needs, which of course is Maslow, and yeah. You're definitely speaking my language there. And the idea of identity. And for me, Dennis and I have had this conversation on podcast Stardust. I feel like Din, the Mandalorian, is actually having a little bit of an identity crisis here as of late, because he did kind of have this ingrained idea of who he was. And then along came the child. And then all of a sudden along came Bo-Katan. And now he's questioning, okay, well, there's two different factions of Mandalorians. I'm a child of the Watch. And then there's these other type of Mandalorians. And then he finds out from Boba that he was also a true Mandalorian. And so his fatherhood right now is the identity that he's able to hang on to. And with the conversation that Mayfeld had with him and the gray area in between, I think he's still struggling with that. And I think that's one of the reasons why he was so quiet. But he knows that there is nothing else at this point in time that's more important to him than Grogu. And that's why he's making these decisions that he's making during this episode, and why things are taking him in the way that they are.
See, I would almost argue that while he's literally wearing all gray, which is a nice little color nod for us, I would argue that he's more clear in what he wants than anything. I don't, and Dennis had talked about this with me when he was on a couple weeks ago, but I think he's not lost in who he is. I think he finally understands it. So whatever he does end up wearing different armor, but this is something that at the beginning of chapter 1 he never would have done. He wouldn't have worn a disguise. He wouldn't. Are you kidding me? That would be like an affront to the way, probably. And then we'll get to the end later and why I think even more that he's not confused in the least. But I love both of your perspectives, and I think Mayfeld becomes interesting, because we at least start to scratch the surface of the fact that there's more to him than meets the eye. But we don't get a lot of time to reflect on that, because we've got this wonderful action sequence that I really just sort of want to address, at least before we move on to the two meatier parts of the end of the episode. But Dan, anything about this truck sequence that you love or you want to talk about?
I think it's hard it's hard to keep. When I was first watching the episode, I realized that it was holding my attention during the scene, which is hard because at my age, middle age, I've seen so many action movies. I start to phase out during action because I feel like I've seen it before. But they did enough in this sequence to make the action interesting and to hold my attention. So I love that. There was like lots of surprises to how Din was defeating them. I like that Mayfeld pointed out another gray area, which was I don't know if he pointed it out or if I actually just thought of it. Maybe I just thought of it. I don't know. But they're basically like freedom fighters because that town they just went through, they're trying to stop the Empire from delivering the stuff which is going to destroy people. So maybe the pursuers are the actual good guys, but the good guys who are in the transport have to kill them to do their mission, which is good. So there's a lot of like this whole episode is making me question those gray areas more than I expected at this point. So that's what I like most about it.
Yeah,
it's like there are good guys and bad guys, and then the people in the transport are good guys and bad guys, and then we get to the Imperial officer later who's, he's trying to convince them that he was doing good with Operation Cinder, but I won't get into that now.
Jay, I love that, Din. Jay, anything about the truck sequence we want to discuss?
Mm-hmm. And you picked up on the same thing I was going to say too, Din. For me, at first, it was very Western-like. I thought about being on top of a train, as it's going down the tracks, and then a fight scene like that. But that did strike me in terms of the fact that these would normally be people that Din would be fighting with, not against. But under these circumstances, it's, as Obi-Wan would say, it's all from a certain point of view. And we've talked before about how evil doesn't think that it's doing evil. It sees it from its own perspective. So there's so much gray area going on here. And, and the first time that Din tried to block one of the sticks, he realized that he wasn't wearing his Beskar. All of a sudden it just broke, and he realized it's almost like this weird realization that, I could be in trouble here. But I did love how grungy the armor was. There was a point on the helmet that Din was wearing that it almost looked like it had something spilled on it that had run down the side of the helmet. And they did such a great job with making it all feel very gritty, very real, very realistic. And these freedom fighters, they would have been the good guys at one point. So again, who's to say who's who? And it was so exciting. I loved this part. I really did.
Yeah, I said this earlier in the show, but it really reminded me of the truck sequence in Raiders of the Lost Ark and how they were fighting on top of that, and the villains just kept coming, and Din Djarin refused to back up in spite of overwhelming odds, and you got the great tension with the fact that the Rhydonium keeps getting to a certain level of heat, which was brilliant. And then at the end, the delicious irony of TIE fighters saving the day.
Yeah.
This all goes into what we've been talking about for the past 5 to 10 minutes or so. And when you couple that, Din, with the fact they get into the Imperial camp and everyone is saluting Din Djarin and Mayfeld like they're heroes. And then we really get into, everybody has their own point of view, their own perspective on fighting for what they think is a just cause or a cause that is worth fighting and dying for. And nowhere is it clearer than in this ironic, beautiful scene.
Mm-hmm. It truly is. And all I could think, I don't know how you guys felt about this, but all I could think about was, Mayfeld, put your bucket back on. He should have had his helmet on. And then he gets out of the transport and he still doesn't have his helmet on. And I'm thinking, okay, he must really feel confident that no one is going to recognize him.
Or he's just kind of a bozo. Yeah, he's just
Maybe.
very kind of he's very reckless.
He is kind of a bozo.
Din, what do you think about the arrival of the Imperial camp and all that interesting perspective shift?
Because I liked it because it's just another layer to the themes of the point of view of the battle, and then what's good and what's bad from whoever's perspective. But I think really just the only thing I was thinking as I watched this episode was how much it really reminded me of shots from Solo. I don't know why, the way it was shot, and just the chase was very Solo to the train heist.
Yeah.
But you asked about the arrival.
Yes, and it with the Imperial saluting, the TIE fighters coming to save the day.
I think I just liked it because it felt alive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what it was an interesting perspective. You never get to see the bad guys, or if they're holding out for a success to happen, with their base. And I guess what I'm saying is, it was interesting to see it from the perspective of the troopers being happy that this mission succeeded.
Yes, very good. Jay, anything else you want to add about that?
Yeah, I'm just kind of springboarding off what you just said too, Dan, is that, with Mayfeld being a former Imperial, again, I think of Finn too, being, FN 2187, that he was a former stormtrooper, and you just really don't know what's going on under the armor. And, parallel that too with Din Djarin and what's going on under his armor too. There's so many parallels to it that it's incredible.
It really is. So we get in there, and we've got, they're in this camp, and all the Imperials are clapping and cheering and saluting, which is very fun, and just you're a little nerve-wracked because, as you mentioned, Mayfeld has his bucket off, where obviously Din Djarin does not. They show up. They've got to go into basically the mess hall area, for lack of a better term. And then we come into Din, what I think is probably the most important part of the entire episode. The only way to get this information on the status stick is to get your face scanned. Talk to me about what happens and why it's so important.
Yeah, to go back to the word soul, and it's just so beautifully acted by Pedro Pascal.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at his face, you're looking at a healed person. You're looking at a healed soul, because, the biggest theme that I think was important to George was well, I shouldn't pretend to know what. One of the biggest themes that was important to him was when he said, that it was only Luke who could bring out the good invader, because George Lucas had felt in his personal life that adopting his first child, like while he was making Return of the Jedi, really, and he felt that he was becoming sort of the head of an empire with Star Wars, that he felt he had something to say about how it's our children that it's the children that save the parents. And that was very important to George. And my force, that is Din and Grogu. Like, Grogu has saved this, he once was lost, now he's found, saved his soul, given him the opportunity to make the choice to be fully human. And the symbolism is just so clear. He takes his mask off, and he's going to be fully human to save the child that saved him. Right?
That's true.
It couldn't be more Lucasian. It's just so beautifully acted. It was just that's one of the reasons why I think this is one of my favorite episodes ever, and I can't not give it a 10 out of 10. Like, just that moment of seeing the soul on his face as he does what he has to do to save Grogu. Wow, it's just beautiful.
It is. It really is. Jay, what stands out to you about it? I mean, it's obviously. Were you surprised by it? I guess I should start with that.
I kind of felt like it had to be coming, because just as soon as they said it's got to be your facial recognition scan, you knew and I had that feeling in the pit of my stomach that, oh gosh, is he? And then the first time that he tried it and it didn't work, and then the system almost went into shutdown, he got desperate. So for me, it was a symbol of sacrifice. He was sacrificing his personal boundaries, his personal values, his personal way of life. I mean, this is the way for him. But yet he was sacrificing that for the good of Grogu to be able to bring him back to where he needed to be. I felt very uncomfortable for him, that he was just so exposed. I mean, from this point on, I felt for him. I had this pit in my stomach the entire time because, he felt like he was naked, exposing himself like that. But I have a question about the facial recognition scan. I'm kind of two minds on this, and I want to know what both of you think of this. Do you think that the scan is just simply to be able to catalog who did access the records? Because I would have thought that the facial recognition scan too might have been put into place as a security mode to be able to authorize someone to access it. So was it a cataloging thing or a security thing? What are your thoughts?
See, my thought is it was a security thing, but in order for you to be scanned, you had to be in the system. That was my thinking is, why would his face work? He has a face, but why would it work unless he's been in the system because of the Empire? And maybe that's how Moff Gideon in Chapter 8 or Chapter 7 actually knows who Din Djarin is. I don't really know. Din, what do you think?
Well, you two have just given me, some viable sort of answers to that. I've got to admit that sometimes in Star Wars that stuff happens, and it just happens because they have to do it so they can get the moment they need, which is Din with his helmet off. And I just go, yeah, okay, I don't want to think about it.
Okay, fair.
I just accept it. I don't want to think about it. They got to do some facial recognition thing to get his helmet off. Okay,
Right.
He's got his helmet off. Let's get to the important stuff.
But there's never any accidents, right? I mean, there's a plan. Why don't we go ahead and take a quick break and we'll return with more of The Believer. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
MEI and Mouse Fan Travel is your one-stop shop for your vacation needs and your plans to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, or the cruise lines. Travel looks much different now than it did a couple of months ago, and with the opening of Walt Disney World and soon, hopefully, the opening of Disneyland, you need a place to go where you can trust, and they will help you figure out and navigate all the different circumstances and guidelines that Disney has put out for you. And I can say that we had our vacation modified, and as soon as dates were announced, MEI contacted me directly to help me reschedule, which is exactly what I was hoping to do. So if you are interested in rescheduling your vacation or want to try to plan a Walt Disney World, Disneyland vacation, or anywhere else you want to go on the planet, be sure to contact MEI and Mouse Fan Travel at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. Their signature service and expert advice will help you maximize your vacation time and dollar, and they will help you figure out all the different changes and modifications going on at the Disney theme parks. They are amazing, and I can tell you, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, the peace of mind that Becky Menken and the crew at MEI and Mouse Fan Travel have given me is invaluable. If you're interested at all, again, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. Let's talk a little bit more about the significance of Din Djarin taking off his helmet in that episode and what it actually means for him. I've watched this episode a couple of times, naturally, as we all have. And when this happened, my son instantly said, "This is my favorite part, Daddy," and because he knew how important it was. And to me, it's so important because this is a full-on embracing that I'm a new person. I'm not a bounty hunter anymore. I'm a dad. That's why I don't think there's any gray in him anymore. There was zero hesitation.
Him.
No, definitely not. There was zero hesitation. He took it off. Yes, he felt vulnerable and exposed, but only because he loves now. I mean, yes, he feels like there's a little bit of that I don't want to be detected, but I think he has less than zero reservations about what he's doing because he loves the child so much. He flat says, "You're special." He calls him special. And he says that very menacingly at the end of the episode of Moff Gideon, which we'll get to. But the fact that he does it, and he does without reservation, and when I was reflecting after the first time, I thought, well, gosh, it doesn't even seem uncomfortable. It's not really dramatic. Maybe that's a problem narratively. But then I looked at it again. I thought, no, it's not a problem at all. It's actually the way it needs to be. This is the way for him. He has no regrets. And in a way, Mayfield, ironically, almost gives him permission when they're having that conversation in that transport, because he says, we've all got our way until we've got that line that we need to cross to hit our needs, and that's not verbatim. but in a way it almost kind of opens the door for that to happen later. And it's really, really, really beautiful. But
I just realized, I have to interject because I just realized it actually, rhymes with the Vader and Luke scene at the end of Jedi where Vader takes his mask off. Just thematically, that he's becoming fully human by taking his mask off to save his son. It's sort of like,
that's true.
That's something only a Padawan of the Master Lucas could really deliver, because he listened and learned so well for so long that he could do that scene without it being a reboot at all.
It's great.
You know what I mean? It's not an homage. It's not a reboot. It's the same thing.
It's mythology,
but in a totally new way.
Yeah, it's mythology. It's taking a structure, a theme, and making it work for a new story to try to get a certain perspective, a certain thematic element across. What isn't cool is Valen Hess. This is the Imperial officer that causes a lot of the drama and tension and brings out a side of Mayfield that we have not seen to this degree.
He was dripping with self-righteousness for himself, for the Empire, just for the fact that, he was kind of in a position of being holier than thou. And you could just tell that Mayfeld was just seething on the inside, because this guy was basically seeing everyone else, including all the troopers, as just, bugs under his feet. Mm-hmm. And even though he had asked them over, for a drink, it was almost in a very narcissistic, self-serving sort of a way, I feel like. And I have to hand it to Din, just kind of sitting there watching the whole thing. Like, you could tell that he was probably sensing some of the building tension the entire time. And all I could think was, oh, Mayfeld, just shut up. Just stop. Just let the guy rattle on. That's just what he does. That's who he is. But, again, this whole idea of the fact that you don't think that you're doing evil. But I think he thought, as far as the Empire goes, it was kind of a fun thing to tick up the deaths, from Operation Cinder. And then, what the Empire is planning, it's going to pale in comparison to Burning Khan. It just, you just feel that just disdain just dripping.
Yeah, he is someone that is very, like, self-righteous is a really good way to describe it. Din, what stands out to you about Valen Hess?
Yeah, I didn't think about it a lot until now as you two were talking, which made me realize a couple of things, that I think he's a sociopath.
Oh yeah.
Who has latched onto this position in a very calculated way to be able to give himself permission to enact his sociopathic desires and ambitions. That's my opinion of him. That I don't think he actually thinks we've talked about how there's in Star Wars and in this episode, there's the characters that from their perspective, they're doing good, but they may be doing bad things. Mm-hmm. I feel like from his perspective, he knows he's doing bad, but he just doesn't care.
Yeah.
Because he wants to climb that ladder. And if the ladder means that it's a part of this rebuilding the Empire that's going to bring order, then that he'll sit nice and comfortably in a comfortable position of status within that order.
Right.
And doesn't care what he has to do to get there.
No, he doesn't. And he brings up Operation Cinder. No, actually, Mayfield brings up Operation Cinder. So for people who are not sure what that is, that was talked about in the Aftermath books, the Chuck Wendig books, and Star Wars Shattered Empire, the comics. It's certainly talked about in Battlefront 2 in the main storyline. But in essence, this is the Emperor's failsafe. If he loses the Galactic Civil War, then he's basically going to try to destroy the galaxy and just take everything out. If he can't be in charge, he doesn't want it to exist. And so it involves destroying a lot of places. He tries to take out Naboo. He does a lot of horrible things even after his initial death. And we learned from Mayfield that 5,000 to 10,000 people died. He was a part of it, including his men. And Valen Hess smugly says, well, we outlived them. It's all for the glory of the Empire. And Mayfield doesn't agree. What about their families? What about these men that I served with? Did they get the chance? Did they get to vote? And this is when he has his metanoia. This is when he has his change of heart. And then he brutally murders Valen Hess. And then things get crazy. But I thought it was a really powerful moment. Jay, talk to me about that part.
Well, yes, Mayfeld definitely shot first. That's for sure. No,
That's right. That's right.
no debate there. But yeah, I mean, the whole time that they were there, obviously Mayfeld was using his imperial knowledge to be able to ingrain themselves as being believed. You talk about the believer, they had to be believed in order to just be there. And I just thought it was brilliant how when Din was kind of fumbling over his TK number and everything, like he's like, oh, you're going to have to speak up a little bit to this guy. And he's so quick-witted. And that was just so incredible. And calling him Brown Eyes, I just thought that was, come on, and then Hess saying, come on, Brown Eyes, let's have a drink. But then when he finally pulled that trigger, you knew, as you said, that the chaos was going to ensue. And as much as I figured, oh, it's going to happen, you go, no. Oh, it just happened. Here we go. And then from there, it was just amazing the way that you see Kara and, why can't I think of her name right
Fennec
now?
Shan.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Fennec Shan, just taking him out from, the sharpshooting from the ridge. That was so impressive. I enjoyed that scene very much. And it was also very scary because I'm afraid of heights.
Yeah, me too. Me too. No, it's pretty stunning because of the impact and what it means. And then he's put his cards down. He's, I have pain because I don't feel good about being a part of this. There's definite trauma because of what he's experienced, what he has lost, and that is why he is lost. But through the Mandalorian, he's able to sort of find more of a sense of self. I do want to point out really quickly that Valen Hess very much seems like a linchpin to the First Order, because he flat out says, not freedom, order. That's something that's very First Order specific. Yes, the Galactic Empire talks about that, but the First Order sort of takes it to another level. It's even in the name of themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So then when it's over, he gives Din Djarin a pass. He says, you did what you had to do. I never saw your face. Let's get out of here. Very, very powerful, the escape. And then Din, we have this great moment. He says, give me that Siler rifle once they get on to Slave One. And he blows that Rhydonium in this Imperial base to smithereens. Talk about the importance of that scene.
Oh, okay, yeah. I just want to say that the last scene that we talked about, I just wanted to comment on when Pedro's eyes, when he looks at Mayfeld, when he knows Mayfeld's going over the edge, and he's like, just Pedro's acting is so good because he really sells that he's just like, no, Grogu. That's all he's thinking.
Yep.
I gotta save this kid. Don't do this. That was great acting. Sorry, but this isn't to me. It was just another little layer to the gray area thing, which was that okay. So he's blowing up the how do you say it? Rhodinium.
Rhydonium. Rhydonium. Yes, Rhydonium.
Okay. Yes. Obviously, when he blows up the Rhydonium, there's probably like 100 troopers that are gonna die, and their families are gonna miss them. So it's another sort of like. Then that's the bigger question of war, right? It's like, well, do we kill this fewer number of people to save a much larger number of people? So I thought of that, but that was the mental side. My emotional side was, oh, this is Star Wars. I love it when it does it right, which is when it takes a bad guy and shows how, or bad girl, whatever, shows how they can become good, or at least back on the path to redemption. And it really makes you feel it. It's like, that's Star Wars. I love it.
And he even says, we all have to sleep at night after he takes that big time shot. Jay, I thought it was really important because it showed that he's willing to put his money where his mouth is. He wasn't out there for destruction. He wasn't out there for chaos. In his mind, if I do this, then more innocent people are not going to suffer. And that ends up ultimately getting him released.
Yes, because Kara's like, oh, nice shot. To me, I don't know. You said about Mayfeld being the believer. I think it was Kara that was the believer. That she hated Mayfeld. She wanted nothing to do with him. He was imperial. He was scum. He was villainy. He was everything that she fought against. And like I said at the beginning, it's kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, because she was going to do anything to help Din get Grogu back. Because in the last episode, she even said, these stripes they come with some things I have to, go for, and I can't do it. And then he said, well, they've got the kid. And then she's just like, ooh, it's on like Donkey Kong. So for me, I feel that she was the believer, and that she saw that people can change and that there is hope for everyone out there.
I was actually thinking at the beginning of the episode that the believer is Cara Dune, Din Djarin, and then Mayfeld. All three of them are believers in their own way, but one of them takes a lot longer to get there. By the way, did you guys notice that Cara Dune, her little mole is the rebel symbol?
Oh, yeah.
I'd never noticed that until this episode.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
From
the very beginning. Yeah. And it's very similar to, what prisoners give themselves if they've, if they've murdered someone in prison. I mean, I hate to go there, but that's the symbolism that's there. But this definitely takes on a different thing when it's a tier of the rebellion, is the way I look at it.
Yeah, no, I agree. So then at the end we get basically the Rambo moment where, we see the Star Destroyer, and my first reaction was, oh no, we're going to see the child, and the child's probably going to be in danger or peril, and it's going to stress me out. We don't see the child. This is the only episode in this series where we haven't seen the child at all. And then when you see Moff Gideon, he's got a message from Din Djarin, who essentially echoes the message that Moff Gideon gives at the end of season 1. But this time, it's much different. And I love the sequence. It's very, very powerful, very much psychs you up. Jay, let's start with you. What'd you make of that part?
Oh, I was pumping my fists definitely on this one, because like you said, it's the exact same speech that Moff Gideon gave to him, but it has a different gravity to it. It's so poignant, but in a different way, because he really does feel that Grogu is, he means more to me than you will ever know, but it's for a different reason. It's for the reason of love, not for using him for what he has. And I just think it's so awesome. I loved it.
In many ways, that was more of a vulnerability than him taking off his armor in that Imperial base.
Oh yeah, so true.
Dan, what about you?
It made me think of Bruce Lee. There's a few things in this series that have,
yeah,
like in the Jedi. She is the daughter of Dan and Santo, who was one of Bruce Lee's major students. And Bruce, I took Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee's school, for a few years, and I got sort of obsessed with Bruce's thinking as a philosopher and artist. And Bruce Lee said, there's a scene in Enter the Dragon where he says, what was that, an exhibition? We need emotional content. And what Bruce meant was that when you use anything. So say someone has hurt your family or said really bad things about you. Instead of lashing out in anger, you internalize that emotion, and that emotion is the energy that you put into the fight.
I love that.
So
yeah,
what they're showing in this scene is that Din has emotional content through the roof. And what Bruce said, I'm getting chills talking about it, because Bruce was like, if you focus on that and you have that, you will never lose the fight, because that is the strongest form of energy that you can internalize and then release. So Din's emotional content in that scene is through the roof, and it's just like I'd be really surprised if Gideon even escapes alive next episode. No one is going to be able to stop that guy now.
Fascinating. Well,
that scene communicated that so powerfully.
Well, very well said. Very well said. Let's hit some Boba Fett highlights before we close out the show, because I really feel like we didn't get to do much justice to that character. Jay, take us through some Boba Fett stuff. We love us some Fett around here now, and ever since last week anyway. I didn't used to before, but I'm a believer now in Boba Fett.
Well, of course, Dan, you know that I have been a Mandalorian fan forever, and I've always had a Boba fetish. So this was such a fun episode because there were some great comedy things in here when he said about, we were talking about faces, and he said, I think they might recognize my face. I cracked up so hard at that, being a clone, of course. And then, hello, seismic charge. I was jumping up and down in my seat because I set my alarm on Friday mornings for 5 o'clock in the morning so that I can watch before I even go to school. And so when that happened, I rewound it just enough so that I could turn up my headphones and just listen to it again, which was amazing. And then, yeah, his armor was looking pretty spiffy, but I have to say, I kind of liked it beat up, that kind of retro sort of look, but I could understand that he wanted to kind of bring it back to life just like he was brought back to life.
I like that. Yeah, like rising from the ashes.
Yeah.
Or the intestines of a sarlacc.
Exactly.
Din, anything you want to add about Boba Fett?
Yeah. Okay. So one of my favorite scenes in the episode was when Boba Fett was explaining the Rhydonium or whatever it's called. Okay.
Yeah.
And he goes, it's highly volatile and explosive. And then Mayfeld's like, oh, what? Like this one over here? He points to Cara Dune. And no one's laughing, and just the way Tamara Morrison looks at him, like this is not. We're not. We're not funny. We're not gonna go there with you. It was just really funny.
Oh, it was very intimidating. He's like, I will eat you, dude.
Yeah.
And I was glad to see he got his blaster. I was just going to say, I'm glad to see he got his blaster back too, or he had his blaster.
Yeah.
Which was awesome.
That was
so
very
iconic.
It really is. It's what the way they've done with reshaping his image, at least in my mind, has been nothing short of stunning and quite exciting.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of spiritual too,
Yeah, very much so.
He's almost Jedi-like, and he seems maybe he's going to be a bit of a mentor to Din.
That would be interesting. We shall certainly see on that one. Let's take a really quick break and close out the show. We'll be back with much more from Din and Jay. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is... yes.
As we near the end of the show today, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a cup of coffee with me and for helping to spread the word about our Star Wars family we've got here at Coffee with Kenobi. Be sure to tune in Monday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/live or www.facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi and have a cup of coffee, tea, or any beverage of your choosing with me as we continue the conversation. To join us in the CWK Cafe, which is our Facebook group, and share your Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler-free place that is also drama-free, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/community and be part of the conversation, talk about this week's show, or just talk about some Star Wars. We have a lot of fun, and you'll make some new friends as well as catch up with longtime friends along the way. I also want to thank all of the new and longtime members of the CWK Alliance and let you know how much I appreciate your help and encouragement. I really appreciate our CWK Alliance members: Carol Cantwell, James Kersey, Greg Hargrove, Cato McNichol, Mary Purdue, Terry King, Smooth Rivera, JC Poe, Ed Kimoto, Robert Avila, Dustin Mills, Chelsea Sansbury, Tyler Pompa, Hannah, Alex Procasio, Ian Thompson, David Nicely, Simbot Deptadarian, Christine Turk, Ross Halliban, Kurt McQuellan, Dan Ream, Colby Mead, Brian Harding, Frank Mulder, Blake Weaver, Chris Metz, LJ Souter, Chris Skavarka, Jeff Ellis, Yancey Evans, Daz Davies, Susan Gray, Thea Selby, Christian Dale, Brian McKinney, Jim Capron, Connie Shee, Jared Cantor, Jason Hall, Eric Struthers, Greg McLaughlin, Aaron Harris, Mark Suter, Angela Sauce, and Dennis Keithley. If you want to join the CWK Alliance, go to www.cwkalliance.com and sign up today. Not only will you help out Coffee with Kenobi, but you also get access to CWK Pour-Over, the exclusive weekly podcast not heard anywhere else. It's a great way to support and help out the show, and 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital to support the incredibly important work they are doing to help these brave children and their families. Plus, contributors at the CWK All-Star level can watch a video podcast of CWK Pour-Over hosted by me, Tom Gross, and Corey Clubb. Feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions. In addition to being part of the community on Facebook, please don't forget to visit our website at www.coffeewithkenobi.com for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. If you have a question for me or just want to share your thoughts on the air, feel free to email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com and I'll share them on the show. You can also connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zaire, MRZEHR, or on Instagram at DanZareCWK. There are also a lot more ways to connect with me and Coffee with Kenobi on social media. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi. Check us out on Pinterest or subscribe to our Coffee with Kenobi YouTube channel. On our YouTube channel, you can find Facebook Live video, different interviews throughout the years, highlights of video coverage throughout the Coffee with Kenobi history, and the audio podcast itself. You can order my book, The Star Wars Book, which I co-wrote with Lucasfilm's Pablo Hidalgo and Cole Horton, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Books A Million, Walmart, or anywhere books are sold. You can also find my writing on Coffee with Kenobi's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I am an official blogger there, and on IGN, where I contribute occasionally to articles about Star Wars, as well as other popular culture topics. If you are considering starting a podcast or a blog, let me know how I can help you get started and make your creative vision a reality. Be sure to check out danzmedia.com and we can get the process started. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. I want to inspire you to be inspired so you can take that first step into a larger world. Thanks as always to our Coffee with Kenobi sponsors, especially MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, our travel partner and your one-stop shop for all things Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or anywhere on the planet you want to go on your vacation. Please go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel to book your magical vacation and help support Coffee with Kenobi in the process. If you like the show, please tweet out that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. And if the Force is especially with you, please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Google Podcasts. Every review makes a huge difference and helps to spread the word, and I can't thank you enough for your help, for your support, and your friendship. I love so much being a part of this wonderful Star Wars community, and I can't thank you enough for all that you do for me and Coffee with Kenobi. Din and Jay, it has been an absolute pleasure to speak with both of you to break down this episode. I mean, The Believer is interesting, very character-driven, and as you said, Din, it's the penultimate episode in Season 2. We're in for quite a finale, and I can't wait to see what happens when everyone thinks about it. And undoubtedly, everyone is going to want to reach out to the two of you if they have not already to continue the conversation. So, Jay, please let everybody know where they can find you and let us know what's going on with Podcast Stardust.
Absolutely. You can definitely find me over on Podcast Stardust, as you said, with my co-host, Dennis Keithley. And we are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. You can catch us on the RetroZap Network. We put out 3 shows a week. We have news, reviews, discussion. We also do a once-a-month fashion and lifestyle roundup that we call World Between Worlds. And so, yeah, we just love it if you tune in. You can find us on everything from Spotify to Audible and Lisbon, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere in between.
I love it. What about you personally, your Twitter feed?
Oh, I am at Joyce Krebs. That's my real name, but of course, Jay is the name of my true self. And so, yes, and I'm also at Krebs Class, which is my Star Wars in the Classroom, I guess you could say, handle on my classroom Twitter as well.
Very good. And Din, where can everybody find you and get a hold of your great music?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. So it's www.f105music.com. And that links to, all our social networks and places you can buy music. If you want to just go directly to a social network, my handle everywhere is F105 Music. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Bandcamps, all of them.
Be sure to follow both Din and Jay for more fun Star Wars conversation. It was so much fun to talk about The Believer with each and every one of you, and we're in that bittersweet wheelhouse, aren't we, where we're so excited to see what's going to happen. Will Grogu be rescued? What's going to happen with the Mandalorian and his newfound crew as they're working together? You want to see what's going to happen, but you also don't want Season 2 to end. But you know what? Whatever the case is, Coffee with Kenobi will be here with you every step of the way to talk about the process and have a great time experiencing the world of Star Wars. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Be sure to join us Monday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, to talk about and share your top 5 moments from the Season 2 finale of The Mandalorian. Have a great rest of your week, and remember, this is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here. Move along. Move along.